Okay, let's unpack this.
We have to, because today, the analysis we're digging into from Mookie Tenenbaum, it really shows the world is running on these two completely different tracks at the same time.
Right. On one hand, you have these geopolitical problems that feel totally stuck,
Mm.
frozen. Latin America is a key example.
And then on the other track, you have this tech revolution that's just accelerating like crazy. I mean, the rise of the AI agent.
And it threatens to just, what, melt down the entire economic foundation we've all been living with?
Yeah,
It's a wild contrast.
it really is.
So our mission for this deep dive is to give you a shortcut, a way to really grasp Tenenbaum's specific insights on both of these fronts. We're going to start with the politics, the high-stakes game in the region.
Using Venezuela as a perfect case study. It's a proxy conflict. It's about geopolitical pressure. It's all there.
Exactly. And then we're going to pivot, and it's a hard pivot, to his truly disruptive outlook on why your smartphone, your shopping habits, are about to become the trigger for a potential global banking crisis.
And that's the connection Tenenbaum makes so brilliantly. You have the end of these big political cycles, like the one we're seeing in South America, happening at the exact same moment that the whole digital world, the one built on data and brands, is getting ready to just collapse.
And we are relying completely on his analysis here. The granular details, the predictions he's made. We're going to get into everything from, the specific type of Venezuelan oil to this concept he has called the loyalty of fright.
And it all builds up to that incredible warning about brand equity and collateralized debt. It's a lot.
It's a huge amount of ground to cover, but the way he connects these two worlds is, well, it's what makes this whole thing so valuable. So let's start where everything feels the most stuck, Venezuela.
Right. Tenenbaum sources paint this picture of a nation that is just caught in a perfect trap, both inside and out.
So when Tenenbaum talks about the Chavismo government, he really pushes back at the idea that we should think about it as, a political party.
Or an ideology you can negotiate with.
Exactly. He says, no, you have to see it as an economic and military structure. And at the top of that structure, he says the military generals are the real power brokers. He calls them the mandamasses.
And that's a key word. It's Spanish. And it basically means the absolute bosses, the top dogs, the ones who really call the shots.
The supreme rulers. And they're the bosses of what he calls the cartel of the suns.
Right, and we should clarify that for you. The Cartel of the Suns is the name that's been associated for years with this huge drug trafficking network that's allegedly run by these very same military figures inside the regime.
So the people in charge of the state are also the heads of the criminal enterprise.
That's his core argument. And that structure alone just dictates the stalemate inside the country.
Because if the people with all the power are also the heads of an organized crime syndicate, the entire incentive to give up that power it evaporates.
Why would you? Why would you ever negotiate yourself into poverty or, much worse, into a prison cell?
You wouldn't.
Precisely. Tenenbaum points out that the income from this narco state is so incredibly high, and it's so tangled up in the personal wealth of these leaders that they literally have no concept of why they would ever even think about stepping down.
So a peaceful transition, a political solution, it's not on the table for them.
Not at all, because for them it represents immediate catastrophic ruin. Financially, existentially, they are way too deep in the profits of this regime to see any other option.
And this all leads to what might be Tenenbaum's most insightful concept for understanding the regime's stability. He calls it the loyalty of fright.
Lealtad del espanto.
Exactly. It's a kind of obedience that's based just on shared risk, on terror.
It's a brilliant way to diagnose how modern authoritarian regimes hold together. We often try to analyze them through the lens of ideology or maybe simple corruption.
Right. Do they believe in the cause?
But Lealtad del Espanto suggests the main thing holding it all together is something way more primal. It's just sheer terror of what happens if they fail.
So Tenenbaum is arguing that the loyalty between these generals isn't about love for the government or belief in its principles.
Not at all. It's based on the absolute certainty that if they lose power, if they let the regime crack or fall, they will all face retribution.
And we're not just talking about losing their money here.
No. You have to understand, we're talking about the possibility of extradition, trials in international courts, life in prison, or, worse, violence within the country itself.
The stakes are as high as they can be.
They are maximum. So the only way for these guys to guarantee their own survival, their wealth, their freedom, is to keep the whole thing going at any cost.
And that psychological trap, makes them impossible to negotiate with.
Utterly, any attempt by the outside world to find a middle ground it's doomed from the start. Because the generals can't risk a single concession that might create a crack in the foundation. They can't negotiate for a soft landing because, as Tenenbaum argues, they believe there is no soft landing for them.
Which is what leads to Tenenbaum's really firm prediction here: total inaction. He stated that the regime will not fall
Nor will it negotiate.
or reach any kind of real agreement. The best you might get is, what, they released a couple of minor political prisoners as a PR move?
A performance, but the core structure doesn't change. And, critically, he just dismisses the idea of a U.S. invasion. It doesn't matter who is in the White House.
So the whole situation is frozen, politically and militarily, from the inside out.
Right, and that internal gridlock is what forces you to take the geopolitical zoom out. Tenenbaum is really insistent on this. If you look at Venezuela as just a local problem, you are missing the entire grand strategic picture.
He sees it as being tangled up in the much bigger story of the tension between Russia and the U.S.
And he specifically ties it to the context of the war in Ukraine.
So it's a global game of push and pull,
Yeah.
a proxy war.
Yeah.
Russia targets American allies, so the U.S. has to respond by targeting Russian allies.
That's the dynamic. And in Tenenbaum's view, Venezuela is the first piece on the board for this U.S. counterpressure strategy.
And Nicaragua and Cuba are next in line.
Exactly. So this isn't about the U.S. responding to, say, instability or drug trafficking as a domestic policy issue.
No, it's a cold, calculated geopolitical strategy. The goal is to destabilize the allies of their main rivals in Moscow and in Beijing.
Right, which brings up a surprising point from Tenenbaum about the role of narcotics in all this. While the narco state is what funds the loyalty of fright on the inside.
He says the actual drug trafficking from Venezuela is a, quote, minor factor in the U.S. pressure campaign right now.
And that's a really key distinction he makes. The narco state is the financial engine that keeps the generals in power. That's the internal dynamic.
But the external motivation for the U.S. to apply pressure right now, that's all about geopolitical leverage.
It is. It's about strategic position, not primarily drug interdiction. The U.S. is using economic levers. And those levers put pressure on Russia and, maybe even more importantly, on China.
And that specific lever is oil.
And this is where Tenenbaum gets into the kind of technical detail that makes his analysis so compelling. He didn't just say oil. He gave a whole description of Venezuelan crude.
He called it the heaviest of all oils and the most difficult to refine.
Which is so important. This isn't just a commodity you can pump out of the ground and sell to anyone. This is super heavy, often full of sulfur. You need very specific, high-quality refineries to handle it.
And where are those refineries?
Well, according to Tenenbaum, they are concentrated mainly in two places, the United States and China. And he added, I don't know where else.
So if the U.S. can cut off access to its own refineries, it accomplishes two things at once. First, it hurts the Venezuelan regime's main source of, legitimate income.
And second, and this is the strategic genius of it, it puts direct pressure on Beijing.
Because China is one of the only other players who can actually process this stuff.
Exactly. They've historically been a key ally, a key debt holder for Venezuela. So by restricting access to this oil, the U.S. is strategically making China scramble. It could drive up their energy costs, force them to find other, more expensive sources.
It's a massive economic and diplomatic squeeze play on a major rival.
It is. Tenenbaum suggests the goal here is layered. Yes, you want to undermine the Venezuelan regime, but maybe the bigger prize is pressuring Beijing and Moscow. And in doing that, the U.S. could gain even more influence in Latin America as these old alliances start to crumble.
And Tenenbaum also connects this huge high-level strategy to a very personal, very human factor that's driving it.
Right.
He points to Marco Rubio.
Right. He noted that because Rubio is the son of Cuban migrants who fled the Castros, he has this deeply personal, almost visceral anger towards the Cuban regime.
And that anger extends to their allies like Venezuela and Nicaragua.
And so that personal conviction acts like a powerful amplifier in Washington. It ensures that this cold, calculated strategy of using heavy oil as a weapon is constantly pushed forward with real political passion.
So it's the personal history of one influential senator that's helping to lock in a policy that already makes sense from a strategic point of view.
It's an incredible mix of forces, isn't it? You have this internal structure that's held together by fear and drug money.
And an external pressure campaign that uses something as specific as heavy oil refining as its main weapon against global superpowers.
That is a level of frozen, interlocking complexity you just you
Yeah.
don't see very often. It shows Tenenbaum is looking past the headlines, you know? He's looking at the actual mechanisms of power, both psychological and logistical.
Okay, so let's take that big geopolitical frame and now apply it to where things are actually moving, the regional political calendar. Tenenbaum gave us a pretty detailed set of projections for where power is shifting across the continent. Let's start with Colombia.
Right. The elections there are scheduled for May 2026.
And his assessment of Colombia is, well, it's startlingly definite. He basically sees those elections as, quote, already terminated.
The outcome is a done deal in his view.
His certainty is just. It's almost absolute. He made this joke. He predicted that the chances of the current left-wing government holding on to power are about the same as Maduro presenting himself seriously
Yeah.
in those elections.
Meaning zero. Absolutely no chance of a left-wing victory.
So the expectation is a massive swing to the right.
A decisive one. Tenenbaum believes the winners will likely be the Uribistas. And for anyone listening who isn't familiar with that term, Uribistas refers to the political movement that's aligned with the former president, Alvaro Uribe.
And they are generally seen as being on the very far right of the spectrum.
Very much so. They emphasize really hardline security policies, privatization, and a totally uncompromising stance against any leftist movements or organized crime.
And Tenenbaum sees this coming victory in Colombia as being hugely significant, not just for Colombia, but because it signals the definitive end of a much bigger continental trend.
It closes a major political cycle. That recent wave of left-wing governments, sometimes called the pink tide, that started with figures in Bolivia.
And it swept through Chile, Ecuador, Peru.
Exactly. A lot of those governments were focused on state control over natural resources, huge social spending programs that were funded by the commodity boom. With Colombia swinging hard to the right, Tenenbaum argues that that whole political dynamic, that entire cycle, is now officially over.
So we've gone from a continent that was largely leaning left back toward a more conservative, more pro-business environment. Where does that leave the last strongholds of the left?
Tenenbaum really only identifies two. First, there's Uruguay, but he pretty much dismisses it in the grand scheme of things.
Right, he said it's a small country and no one cares about it when you're talking about continental power shifts.
The second one, though, is much more important. Brazil, with Lula in power. Brazil is the last decisive piece of the puzzle for what he calls the relevant left.
And looking at the presidential race there, Tenenbaum laid out two different scenarios. It all depends on who runs against Lula. Let's start with the possibility of Bolsonaro Jr.
Yeah, Tenenbaum was pretty cautious about the younger Bolsonaro. He suggested that, while he might have the name recognition and the desire to run, if he goes up against Lula, it could be a disaster for the right.
Or at least difficult to win.
Right. Lula still has a significant grassroots base and just vast political experience. So for the right to really get that final victory that ends the cycle, they need a stronger candidate, maybe someone more moderate.
And he identifies that stronger candidate as the successful governor of Sao Paulo.
That's the key figure. Tenenbaum suggests that if the governor of Sao Paulo runs, using his track record and his broader appeal, he would probably beat Lula.
And that victory would be the final, biggest domino to fall.
And that would effectively mean the end of the relevant left as a major political force across the continent. The entire political climate would have swung back.
Okay, now let's shift north to Mexico. It represents a different kind of complexity, especially with its relationship to the U.S. Tenenbaum took a close look at the current female presidential candidate, the former mayor of Mexico City.
And she has a really unique profile. He highlighted her academic background. Her parents were academics. So she comes from this world of science and policy, not from a traditional political dynasty or the military.
And he noted that she has a record of getting very good results, even with all the challenges and the chaos that you often see in Mexican governance.
But the critical thing, the real dynamic to watch, is her approach to the huge problem of organized crime, the narcos. And she has been very active in trying to separate herself from her predecessor.
Who basically had an unwritten agreement with the cartels, right? A kind of non-aggression pact.
An effective one, if an implicit one, in exchange for a level of stability. Tenenbaum emphasizes that she has gone out of her way to publicly distance herself from that policy. She's determined to avoid that path and project an image of authority, of legality.
But he added this fascinating little footnote about her time as mayor. It suggests the reality on the ground is maybe more complicated than the rhetoric.
It always is. He pointed out that despite her wanting to distance herself from any agreements during her government in Mexico City, narcos were never pursued.
which isn't necessarily a criticism.
No, it's a subtle piece of context. It suggests a very pragmatic approach. You avoid the open warfare that destabilizes your city, while at the same time, you publicly reject the political deals of the past. It just speaks to how incredibly difficult it is to govern in Mexico's security environment.
And finally, her relationship with the United States, specifically the dynamic he observed with Donald Trump.
Yeah, Tenenbaum referenced this visual of Trump interacting with her, being on good terms, almost joking with her when the World Cup plans were being presented.
And that suggests a pragmatism that can cross political lines.
It implies that she could be a manageable partner for the U.S. no matter who is in the White House. Her profile is unique, she's pragmatic, she's educated, and she seems to be able to command respect from the U.S. establishment. She's a different kind of variable for Mexico.
Speaking of leaders who are breaking the mold, we have to talk about the Milei phenomenon in Argentina. Tenenbaum made a really powerful case for just how much this figure has gone beyond regional politics. He's become a global figure of idealization.
The level of international recognition he described is it's truly amazing. He shared this personal story that really crystallizes
The
it.
messy anecdote.
The messy anecdote. He said that when he meets people around the world now and they find out he's Argentinian, the first thing they say is Milei, before they mention Messi.
To displace Lionel Messi as the #1 global association for Argentina it's staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this isn't just, a few neighboring countries. He listed off places that are completely removed from Latin American politics.
Thailand, Cambodia,
Uzbekistan.
Japan, Egypt, Israel. Though Israel is less surprising given Milei's very pro-Israel stance.
Yeah.
But this widespread interest suggests his libertarian, anti-establishment message is hitting a nerve globally.
With voters who feel betrayed by traditional politics, whether it's left or right. Exactly. His dramatic style is economic shock therapy. It's being idealized as a kind of blueprint for disruption everywhere.
And back home, that global fame is being backed up by real political strength. Tenenbaum pointed out that his position was really solidified by his big win in the midterm elections.
He's consolidated power much faster than a lot of analysts thought he would. He's gaining political capital where so many past Argentine governments have just failed.
And Tenenbaum strongly predicts he has very good chances of being reelected.
But the most insightful part of Tenenbaum's analysis of Milei isn't about the polls. It's about the fundamental, irreversible generational shift that's powering his entire movement.
This demographic point is just a devastating reality check for the traditional opposition parties in Argentina.
It's a political death sentence. Tenenbaum's observation is that the support base for the opposition, the Peronists and the other old parties, is literally dying. It's an aging demographic that's tied to older ideas of the state.
And at the same time, his new supporters, the Mileistas, are being born.
They're the youth, the digital natives. They are firmly behind him. And when one side's base is shrinking every year and the other side is being constantly refreshed by young, enthusiastic voters, well, the long-term political direction is crystal clear. The future belongs to the disruptors.
That generational shift raises a huge question then. If politics is changing this dramatically, if these old left-right cycles are ending in places like Colombia, Brazil, and the youth are just rejecting the old models in Argentina, what kind of economic plan are these new leaders making? Are they looking at 2026, 2027, and building policies for that new world?
And that is the exact question where Tenenbaum's analysis it slams on the brakes. When you ask about the future political roadmap, his answer is just so stark. He basically says he doesn't even know what seducing for what or how means anymore.
Because all those political roadmaps,
Yeah.
left, right, Eurobista, Maliste,
All of them, they are about to be made completely obsolete by the technological revolution.
it's the ultimate pivot. Everything we just talked about, all the detailed geopolitics, the heavy oil strategy, the election calendars, it's all secondary to this imminent economic catastrophe that's being driven by technology.
Tenenbaum believes the AI revolution is so profound, so fundamental, that any political or economic plan for the next few years that doesn't account for the total dominance of AI agents in our daily lives it's utterly meaningless.
The entire foundation is about to be pulled out from under the system.
And that is where we have to dive in next.
Okay, so Tenenbaum starts with just the sheer speed of this change. He stresses that the AI revolution is, and I'm quoting him, much, much, much greater than it seems.
We're past the initial hype. We are on the verge of massive exponential growth, and it's all focused on one key development: the agent.
He identifies the AI agent as the next big thing that will fundamentally change everything about global commerce. He defines it as your digital hand within the web.
A truly independent, personalized surrogate. It represents only you and only your interests across the entire internet.
And his vision for how we interact with all this tech is, well, it's kind of frighteningly simple. He suggests that eventually your phone will just have one app, and that app will be your agent.
It becomes the sole go-between for everything you do. Every digital and physical transaction, you just delegate everything to it.
And its role as the only intermediary is the key revolutionary concept, because it introduces something that the entire trillion-dollar internet economy has been built to suppress.
Anonymity.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this, because this anonymity is the weapon he says will dismantle data monopolies like Amazon and Meta.
Okay, so imagine you need to buy something simple. He used the example of a gray size 22 round neck shirt.
Right. Currently, I go to Amazon or maybe a brand's website, and the second I land there, they know who I am.
They know everything. You're a 40-year-old male, you live in the ZIP code, you bought 2 blue shirts last month, you prefer sustainable fabrics. That profile data is literally worth billions.
But with the agent, all of that changes.
Instantly, you just tell your agent, get me that shirt, best price delivered by tomorrow, and your agent then goes out and auctions for it. It checks thousands of vendors, distributors, marketplaces, all at the same time.
But here's the critical part. The agent is anonymous.
Completely anonymous. No one knows who the agent is working for. All the marketplaces see is a request for a commodity. A gray, size 22 round neck shirt submitted by an anonymous digital wallet that's willing to pay X price.
So all that valuable data about me, my profile, my preferences, my history, my brand loyalty, it just disappears from the transaction.
Gone. Correct. And the platforms that dominate the world today, like Mercado Libre and Amazon, they make almost all their profit by collecting and monetizing that exact consumer data. Tenenbaum warns that this anonymity creates a very serious problem for them.
Because if the agent makes their data obsolete, they can no longer justify their huge valuations, which are based on their ability to predict my behavior and market to me.
Exactly. They lose their primary competitive advantage. They can't charge premium prices based on brand loyalty or targeted ads because the agent only cares about specs and price.
So they get stripped down from being data brokers that also happen to sell things to just being logistical services. They sell to the highest bidder, offering the lowest price for a commodity. They lose their monopoly on consumer insight, and the entire economic infrastructure built around tracking and advertising it collapses.
And this loss of consumer preference data, Tenenbaum argues, leads to an even more profound consequence. He calls it the end of brands.
And this is the truly devastating conclusion he comes to. If your AI agent is really objective and anonymous, if it's only operating on your instructions and optimizing for price and quality, it fundamentally does not care if that gray shirt is made by Nike or Adidas or some generic factory in Vietnam.
As long as the size, color, and fabric quality are what you asked for.
Right, all the emotional stuff, the celebrity endorsements, the status, everything that creates brand loyalty, it becomes completely irrelevant to the agent's calculation. But hold on, what about a luxury brand, a status symbol like a Rolex, or maybe even something like high-end pharmaceuticals? Wouldn't they survive because the agent can't really quantify that emotional value?
That's a great question, and Tenenbaum's argument focuses more on the vast majority of consumer businesses. You're right, pure status symbols might hang on for a while, but even they're not safe.
How so?
Well, if the agent can find an objectively identical product, same materials, same durability, same warranty, for half the price, it will present that option to you. And then you, the human, have to consciously override your agent's objective recommendation based purely on emotion.
And for most things, sneakers, household goods, electronics, clothes, people won't do that.
Exactly. For the huge middle ground of commerce, the brand value, the perception of quality that's built by marketing will be destroyed because it's not quantifiable by the objective agent.
And this leads to the economic collapse of many global companies, because for these modern corporations, the brand is the value.
This is the absolute core of Tenenbaum's economic warning. He gave a very specific example with Nike. He noted that the brand itself is 92% of its value.
92%. That number is it's insane.
Think about what that means. Only 8% of that company's entire valuation is intangible assets. The physical factories, the inventory and warehouses, the shoe designs, the buildings.
The other 92% is just intangible. It's the brand equity, the logo, the consumer preference, the promise of future sales.
Right. So as the AI agent makes all that preference data irrelevant, it directly attacks that 92%. The corporate balance sheet is instantly exposed.
The value just vanishes.
It evaporates. As brands lose their power to command premium prices and justify that huge valuation, the company balance sheets are gutted. And that will cause a rapid, maybe even instantaneous sell-off by shareholders.
So these huge companies suddenly find themselves valued at maybe a tenth of what they were before.
And this is where Tenenbaum connects the AI agent to the entire financial system, the banking cascade. I think I see where this is going. Are you saying the agent threatens the bank's actual collateral?
That has to be it.
Absolutely. This is the ultimate danger he's warning about. A systemic threat to global financial stability. Banks don't lend billions of dollars to companies like Nike based on the value of their sneakers alone.
They lend against the perceived future cash flow that's guaranteed by the massive value of the brand. The brand equity is the collateral.
You can think of brand equity as this huge, intangible insurance policy. The banks look at a global logo and say, that logo is guaranteed to generate stable income for decades, and they lend money against that promise.
It's a perfect way to put it.
So when the brand value is destroyed, when that 92% vanishes because the AI agent just bypasses brand loyalty, the bank's collateral disappears overnight,
And the company suddenly can't service its debt, and the loan is immediately underwater.
creating a severe problem like the banks. It's an inevitable cascade effect that could destabilize the entire financial system because that system relied on the stability of global brands as a core asset. And Tenenbaum sees this chain of events coming fast.
So the natural reaction from the big players, from Amazon or Mercado Libre, would be to try and control this,
Yeah.
to offer their own agents.
Oh, he predicts they will absolutely try, but he's very firm that they will fail because they can't overcome the need for objectivity.
Right. An agent from Amazon is always going to be biased towards selling Amazon's products.
Or prioritizing its partners. An agent from Mercado Libre will push its own ecosystem, and the whole revolutionary point of the agent is pure objective service to you, the user.
So consumers will demand an agent that is 100% objective.
Exactly, to make sure they're getting the best deal no matter the marketplace or brand. So Tenenbaum suggests users will just bypass the biased agents from Amazon. They'll use Google agents, or they'll buy or rent their own truly independent agent to ensure total loyalty.
That objective, loyal, anonymous agent is the future.
And the existing marketplaces can't stop it without destroying their own business model.
And finally, Tenenbaum points to a huge, very recent strategic move by Meta that he says confirms the giants are already preparing for this exact future.
Right. Meta recently bought a company called Manus. Tenenbaum